Welcome to Wine for Normal People, the podcast for people who like wine, but not the snobbery that goes with it. I'm your host, Elizabeth Schneider, author of the Wine for Normal People book and certified wine dork.
And I'm MC Ice, just a wine-loving normal person.
The show is sponsored by Wine Spies. You want to score a $100 Napa cab for $25? Visit winespies.com/normal and listen in the middle of the show for more details. On my recent trip to the Médoc, no one left me as hopeful, excited, and awed as Jean-Baptiste Cordonnier of Château Anthonic. There are only a few times in my career I have met with someone who has ideas that are so revolutionary in a good way and who actually does what they talk about. And this is one of those times. It was my first visit on this trip to the Médoc, and it turned out to be the standard by which I judged everyone else from a sustainability perspective. I could not stop thinking about our conversation. I knew I had to bring Jean-Baptiste to you, the listeners, so you could hear what I heard and be just as wowed. As background, Château Anthonic is in Moulis-en-Médoc, the appellation on the Left Bank of Bordeaux. It's owned and operated by Jean-Baptiste and Nathalie Cordonnier. They make red wine from mainly Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon and some Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. The estate is around 37 hectares or 91 acres, but the vineyard only covers 28 hectares or 69 acres. And as you'll soon hear, the rest is a beautiful open meadow and forest that allows species to thrive and the earth to regenerate to make great wine now and in the future. Jean-Baptiste is not just concerned with the environment. He's figured out how to make changes economically viable. He's incorporated true sustainability by founding with his wife an organization that helps young people in the local area who have a hard time getting to learn organics. Lots of people claim to do great things, but this is the real thing. I could not be more excited to have you here, Jean-Baptiste. Welcome, and thank you so much for doing what you do and being who you are.
Thanks.
Give us the background of the chateau and your family's history in the Médoc, and your chateau is family run. So tell us how your family wound up in the Médoc, or have they always been there?
Not always. My father bought the estate in 1977. So it was at that time an estate in very bad shape with owls nesting in the cellars, 3 very old vats with holes inside, and only 4 or 5 hectares of very old vines in very bad shape. So he had to rebuild the estate the first decade between 77 and 1987. Anthonic was a bit larger, 17 hectares. And at that time, I left my family for my student period. I was learning agriculture engineering in Belgium, then water and forestry in the same school. So I spent 5 years out of the estate for that reason, and then 2 years in Africa. And I was back to the estate 7 years later, in 93. And then I took over after my father. And I've doubled the size of the estate until the size we have today. We will be back to 35 hectares quite soon because we have bought a new estate 2 months ago.
Wait a second. You did not tell me that you went to Africa. Can you back up and talk about what you did in Africa?
I was there for agriculture development. I was working for a non-governmental organization, depending of the Catholic Church. And I was mostly teaching science in high school. I was also teaching agriculture in the village where the school was located, and I was also teaching agriculture with a colleague of mine to young prisoners that were coming out from the prison to have a life project.
When you were in school in Belgium, you were not studying viticulture, you were studying forestry, right? Or agriculture?
I was studying first general agriculture, and then the 3 last years I spent my whole time to learn water and forest engineering.
Okay.
I had to write a small thesis. My choice was tropical forest ecology.
Let's really hope that you don't need that at any point in the Médoc. Let's hope that it doesn't turn tropical.
So that's my background.
The chateau is family run, so what does each person do?
We are working in family, as you say. Natalie is doing the communication. Théophile is mostly doing the sales. I'm now quite far from the sales. That's his job now, and he's developing all the markets, France and export. And for the techniques, we have Emmanuel Chetty, who is our technical director, because we are not big enough to have a complete staff with a technical director, chief of the culture, and cellar master. It's all in one hand with Emmanuel. But we share that with him, and both of us, Théophile and me, help him to share that charge when it's the high season, harvest or growing season of the vine.
So everybody's doing everything. But you do a lot of the vineyard stuff, and you direct a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm giving the direction, the policy, the type of agriculture we want to develop, because it's quite
different,
original, quite different. It's a side trail we take. I hope it will become a standard, but I'm highly invested in that direction. But the manager of the team is mostly Emmanuel.
Basically, most of the show is going to be about your unique philosophy and the amazing things that you've done. But let's just talk about Moulis, which it's an appellation that's less famous than Margaux or Pauillac. So can you tell us about the terroir, what's grown here, the differences between Moulis and some of the other appellations of the Médoc, just so that we have a framework?
Your question is very interesting, because Moulis is like a patchwork at a very small scale of all the terroirs and the climate of the southern Médoc. You can find in Moulis all the terroir. You have some parcels that are with soils quite similar to the gravels of Margaux. You have some parcels who are closer to the gravels, the fat gravels with clay, like in Saint-Julien. You have some limestone clay soils with fossils like you find in Saint-Estèphe. So it's a patchwork. It's very diverse, and from one parcel to the other, you have a big change. And if you want to have a complete idea of the Médoc in one place, the place is Moulis-en-Médoc.
Yeah, it's internal. It's away from the river.
Yeah.
And hillier too, right?
Yeah. But when you are in the eastern part of Moulis, in Grand Pougeot, you are quite close to the river.
Mm-hmm.
You still have the river influence, and you don't find that anymore when you are in the center part of Moulis, when you are in the plateau of the village, like in Anthonic, and you are more on the forest and Atlantic influence when you go to the west part of Moulis, Bouqueran. So I have most of my parcels around in one big plot around Anthonic, but I have also 4 hectares on the west part, close to the forest and closer to the ocean. And I had 1 hectare closer to the east part near Grand Pougeot. And now I've bought 9 hectares more in Grand Pougeot. That influence of the river. So I'm on the 3 main terroir and microclimates of Moulis now.
It's really interesting that it's that diverse and varied. I think most people, when they think about Médoc in general, think of it as the communes, but the interesting thing is they're big enough, so there are a lot of micro terroir within each.
Yeah.
Around the estate, you showed me the blue clay, which I've never seen that before. It's amazing. What does that do for the wine?
So that's also quite unique, because another character of Moulis is that we have spots of forest inside the vineyards. They almost disappeared of the other appellation, and they are still present in Moulis. That's very interesting. About the blue clay, it's the underground we have in all the parcels that are located around the chateau.
Mm-hmm.
All these parcels are with this very compact blue clay underground and limestone clay soils close to the surface. And this blue clay is very difficult to penetrate by the roots, but it's also a reservoir of iron and of water. And both of them will be very helpful to have a very solid vine able to resist the heat waves and the droughts. So it's a very interesting terroir that is very local. We are only a few estates to share that kind of soils in Médoc, most of them around Anthonic. And Anthonic is the estate with more than 70% of the parcels with that type of soil. These soils are more common in Saint-Émilion and Pomerol than here. So it's quite original because we have the climate of the Médoc with soils that are closer to Saint-Émilion or Pomerol. So it's a mix. And that's maybe the reason why we have a bit more Cabernet Franc than others.
Seems like Cabernet Franc is not as popular as it used to be in the Médoc. It seems like people are getting rid of it.
Yeah, they were not very popular in Médoc, and here in Anthonic they are developing. We have planted more Cabernet Franc than before, and we are developing both Petit Verdot and Cabernet Franc together.
Good for balance, right? But still, it's mostly Merlot.
It's still mostly Merlot because that terroir is fantastic for the Merlot expression. The Merlot varietals, they like that blue clay because they will find the water they need in summer without risk to miss of water. That's very important for them. And if we are able to keep a fresher microclimate in the parcel, we need to keep that Merlot presence even with the global warming. And we are able to do that in the presence of the Merlot in future in Moulis. We will adapt to that global warming with our culture and our new methods.
Do you think that other people, do you think that they're going to have to get rid of Merlot in places like Margaux or Saint-Julien?
In these places, Merlot is decreasing because the problem they have is that they have deep gravel soils that are suited for Cabernet Sauvignon, and the risk is more important for them to have Merlot that will suffer in summer. That risk is lower for us in Moulis and much lower for us in Anthonic because we are practicing agroforestry and we are able to act on the microclimate of the parcel with agroforestry.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Your philosophy is so different from everybody else in wine. You're so innovative. You're now teaching other people. As you explained to me when we met, you look at the issues in a very systematic way. So can you talk about the phases that humans have done to systematically destroy what we have on the earth?
So to summarize that evolution, words are dangerous because I don't believe that we have killed everything and that was something volunteer. We were wanting that. It's mostly an addition of mistakes, misunderstandings, and some excess. But I can show you a small history of the three big steps we have met in agriculture. The first one was with the invention of the motors. We have started that at the end of the 19th century with the new tractors. We suddenly were able to do the work of one man plus one animal, to do that with one man and one machine at a larger scale. So one man was able to do the job of 100 horses with one machine. Suddenly, we were able to work the soils on larger surfaces in one day and to work the soil deeper than before. So we suddenly had an access to the organic inventory of the soil that was not available for the plants we were cultivating at a lower scale. And so the consequence was that we increased the productivity of the soils that time because all these organic materials that were in the storage of the soil were transformed quite fast in minerals that were available for the plants. So the productivity increased quite fast. But the result was that we have the power to destroy the structure of the soil because organic materials are the skeleton of the soil. They are giving the structure of the soil. And if you lose that inventory, you lose the structure, the ability for the soil to keep the minerals, to keep the water, and to keep some air inside. After that period, we have reached some limits and we had then a decreasing of the productivity. And then we had the second revolution. I can date that period, the first decades of the 20th century. The second revolution was the discovery of the mineral fertilizers. The agronomes, we have discovered that every plant, every species of plant, they had different needs of minerals. Some of them they were needing more nitrogen, others more potassium, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to create mineral fertilizers with the exact need of every species. So we have made a compensation because the organic materials were destroying. We were able to make a compensation to feed the plant direct with the minerals, not the minerals coming from the slow destruction of the organic inventory of the soil. And then we increased the productivity of the cultures. So that was the second revolution. But the problem is that both of them, working the soils with heavy machines and destroying the organic inventory, feeding the plants with minerals, had a bad influence on the fungi.
Well, it made the plant dependent upon us, right? That was the other thing that you said. Yeah. So it could no longer do its own thing. Humans had to be there to feed the plant to do well.
Yeah. And but we didn't know that period that the plants were living in community with fungus.
This is a really interesting thing. This is one of the most fascinating things I've ever heard anybody talk about plants.
So these plants that were living on our parcels, all the plants we were cultivating, like the trees in the forest, were living in community with fungi. They were hosting on their roots and even inside their own roots. And these fungi were taking water in the soil. They were making an inventory of water that they were sharing with the plants. They were taking the minerals because their mycelium was much thinner than the roots of the plants. So they were able, these fungi, to have an access to very small minerals. And they were more efficient than the plants to do that. And they were sharing these minerals with the plants. And both working, plugging of the soil and mineral fertilizers were negative for the fungi because the mineral fertilizers are toxic for the fungi. And when you plug the soils, when you work the soils, you physically destroy the fungi and their mycelium. And so you lose that association between the plants and the fungi. So after these two revolutions, we had a new summit in production and then new problems because with the destruction of that natural balance, our parcels were monospecific, they were larger, losing their mycorrhizas, and all the system was unbalanced, and our plants were more sensible to the negative fungi that were eating our crops. And in the vine production, that's mildew, black rot, oidium, so they had more place and less resistance from the vine. The vines were less resistant.
Let me just ask you this. So no one's thought about the ecosystem of the fungus. When did we figure out that that was a problem? Obviously, at some point, someone has recently figured this out, or maybe they knew it a long time ago, that this ecosystem was vital.
So I'll answer that question in 1 minute. Then we had the third revolution. The third revolution is that we had more fungi attacks against our crops. And so we had then the third agricultural revolution with the discovery of the chemicals. That was after the Second World War and until now. We have discovered a new chemical for every disease and a new family of chemicals every time we had a new resistance to the previous one. And so it was very simple. Oh, we have in that unbalanced system an attack with new disease, no problem. We invent a new chemical that will kill that fungi that is a parasite of my tobacco or potato or vine, and let's do like that. And then we increased a lot the production for the third time, but that was also very negative for the fungi that were still present on the roots. And we have completely destroyed the soil ecosystem with these three steps: mechanics, mineral fertilizers, and then chemicals. They were selected to destroy negative fungi, but they were also destroying the other good ones. And we also had bigger parcels without trees. And the trees were the main host of the mycorrhizas. So the system was completely imbalanced. And then we have discovered in agriculture that maybe we have ignored the presence of these mycorrhizas. There were some scientists, they had discovered the mycorrhizas during the 19th centuries.
Wow.
Some Russian scientists were talking about the mycorrhizas 19th century.
That long ago.
But that was an hypothesis. And some people were saying, no, it's false. I'm not sure it's true. And it was definitely accepted by the scientific community very late in the second half of the 20th century. To find a place from the laboratory to the parcels, it's natural. You need a few decades. And now it's arriving inside the parcels at the level of the agricultors that are rediscovering that community. And a lot of agricultors are changing their methods because they know that they will need the help of these fungi. And the reason why we discover that everywhere in the world we discover the mycorrhizas in agriculture, the main reason is that we have a new guest in the dance with the global warming. And that's disturbing the balance. And we have no answer facing the global warming. Some people, they believe that the genetic selection will give us a forced revolution to develop new techniques. But now we have doubts. We know that we had 3 times in the past a new answer. A lot of agricultors are quite skeptic when they hear that with genetics, they will have the answer. We will have warmer climate, more droughts. So what? We accept the fact and we change the varietals to resist until we have only cactus cultivation all around the world. I'm not sure it's the answer we will all accept.
Well, we could all have mezcal, I guess, instead of wine.
Yeah. So a lot of agricultors, they ask themselves the question, I will maybe change my method to recreate a new balance in my soil, and maybe I can act on the microclimate of the parcel to face the global warming and to keep my production.
So explain how you have implemented the process of regenerating or building the soil. All we hear about are biodynamics and organics. This is something completely different. It takes it in a completely different direction. So how do you do this? What have you done? And
I believe that the practicants of biodynamic and organic agriculture, they have opened the door to agroforestry. That's my personal opinion. I know some people that are practicing agroforestry and conventional agriculture together.
Oh, wow.
My strong opinion is that you cannot build a completely balanced system in agroforestry if you are still disturbing the fungi with chemicals.
Right.
So
it doesn't seem to make any sense.
So I believe that the organic producers and the biodynamic producers, they have opened the way to us. But the concept of agroforestry is very simple. It's copying the soil of the forest in the agriculture production. That's the key point. We know in agriculture that the best soil, the most productive soils, are the forest soils. When you cut a forest, you burn it and you plant seeds, you will make fantastic productions for a few years, but only a few years. Then you will lose your soil because it will be destroyed by the elements, the sun, the water, the wind, erosion. The soil will lose its organic inventory that was built during centuries, millennia. It will lose that quite fast. And then you have to add a lot of things to keep that fertility. In agroforestry, we will try to have the agriculture on a soil that will come back quite close to a forest soil without the presence of the forest. And you need 3 things to do that. The first one is to reintroduce hedges in the parcels. When you plant hedges with small trees, small species of trees, and some bigger trees that are occupying the higher level in the hedge, you will build wildlife corridors that will make a connection between the forest close to the farm and to build a sort of network inside the parcels. And all the species, insects, birds, and the fungi, the mycorrhizal fungi, will follow these biodiversity corridors, and they will be hosted on the roots of these small trees inside the edges. And they will make the first connection with the species you are cultivating in your parcels.
We'll take a step away from the podcast to remind you that winefornormalpeople.com/classes is where you can register for live online classes with me. So fun, so interactive, and you will learn a ton. It's like a live podcast that is with a group of fantastic people, and it is so fun. What a great way to spend your time. Also, Patreon, patreon.com/wine for normal people. Less than 4% of listeners contribute to the Patreon community. If you think the podcast is worth $20 a year, that would be super helpful to us. Tons of great conversation, fun, a great escape from the real world. And we have such a wonderful time with everything that we do on Patreon, patreon.com/wine for normal people. And we need to thank our sponsors. We do every week, The Wine Spies. The Wine Spies are a flash sale, one deal a day site. They are not a wine club. They give you an email a day. That's the only thing you sign up for. You buy what you want, when you want it. One wine per day is offered up to a 75% discount. They pick only the top wines, and then they give you the best price in the country. You've got no obligation to buy. They have a wide range of interesting wines, but also the standards, Cab, Zinfandel, Pinot, Chardonnay. They've got big producers, they've got small producers, and they have the build a case feature, the locker feature. You can just pick a wine here or wine there as you see it, add it to your locker upon checkout. Instead of having to buy 4 bottles or 6 bottles of the same wine to get free shipping, you can just buy 1 or 2. When you get 12 bottles in your locker, they ship it to you for free. Here's what you're going to do. Visit winespies.com/normal and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Wine Spies, winespies.com/normal. Do it today. And now let's get back to this amazing show with Jean-Baptiste from Château Anthonic. When you were picking the hedges, you were picking things that were native and that they're not going to shade anything, right?
Yeah. We will not have a shade competition with the hedges. We use native plants and we control the hedges. We prune them.
Yeah,
and
of course.
we will feed the soils of our parcels with the young branches we cut every year on the edges. And we crush these branches to send them to the soil of the parcel. That's the best starter you can imagine to rebuild the organic inventory of the soil. So the second base, the cover crop. And the third one is the trees. So I'll talk about the trees.
When you think about a vineyard, you think about trees maybe on the outskirts and it's just near the tasting room or...
No, it's inside the system.
Right. This is different.
Yeah, but it's not a forest. It's trees split in the parcels. It's organized. In my case, I have planted rows of trees every 30 meters inside my parcels. And I do that since 2016. In every parcel I plant or replant every year, I do it like that. 20 rows of vines, then 1 row of trees. And again, so the hedge, 20 rows of vines, 30 meters, then a line of trees, 30 meters with vine, then a line of trees, etc., until the next limit of the parcel with a ditch, with a hedge boarding the ditch. So
now you do this because you figured out about how much distance. Can you tell us about that? Because this is also super fascinating.
Yeah, I do that because with that distance of 30 meters between 2 lines of trees, the maximum distance between a vine, one particular vine in the parcel, and the next tree will be 15 to max 20 meters. Okay?
Yep.
And at that distance, we know that the fungi will be able to make connections together.
They can talk to each other.
Yeah. And every tree will host is able to host hundreds of species of fungi. And all these species will talk together, will make a very diverse network. It's a sort of soil internet.
It's a great way to put it.
So it's the soil wide web, and and this is an ecosystem that is completely invisible because it's close inside the soil, but it's much more diverse than in terms of number of species that the visible biodiversity you have higher than the soil in the air. So that's the second base of the agroforestry. And the third one...
Wait, before you get to that, another thing I think you said is that you could cut off a lot of the branches of the tree and still get this same effect, right? Because a lot of this stuff is happening underneath the ground.
Yeah, like in the hedges, we control the size of the trees because...
So they're not shading the grapes.
Yeah.
Unless you want them to.
Yeah, if you don't prune the trees, they will be very high, very large, and you will have a competition for light that could maybe be a problem. So the idea is to prune these trees every 3-4 years at 2.5, 3 meters high, and then they restart from scratch with new branches.
But the benefits underneath are still going on. As long as you don't kill what's on top, you can still get the main benefit, which is what's happening underneath, right?
Yeah. These trees will stay alive. You cut the canopy and they create a new one.
Yep.
And with some species of fruit trees, it's surprising because it's very violent for the tree, but increasing the duration of the life of the tree. And that's very interesting. And these branches we cut every 3-4 years. We crush them, we send them to the soil, and that's a new starter to rebuild the soil.
Mm-hmm.
But with the hedges, plus the 43 trees per hectare we have implemented in the parcels, it's a pale copy of the forest, because in a forest you have hundreds, maybe thousands of trees per hectare. And here, with the hedges and the trees inside the parcels, we have maybe in total less than 100 trees per hectare.
It's still a lot more than most other people, though.
So that's not the same like in a forest. In a forest, hundreds
There's
of
trees everywhere.
Will feed the soil every year with their leaves, and they feed the soil. That's the reason why the soil of the forest is so fertile, because you have no exportation, and they create a lot of organic materials by photosynthesis, and they feed the soil with that. And with our poor maximum between 50 and 100 trees per hectare in our system, we have a pale copy of that. It's a max of 20% of the volume of organic material, but closer to 10 to 15% of the organic materials you give with a natural forest to the soil. So it's not enough. So then we need the third base to feed the soil with organic materials. And we cultivate between the rows. We will seed plants after harvest or during harvest, and these plants will grow between the rows during the off-season, autumn, winter, and beginning of the spring. This cover crop will be very dynamic in spring and will produce a lot of biomass, a lot of organic material from nothing, with the air and the light. By photosynthesis, they will take carbon and nitrogen in the air, they will fix it in their body, and when we will crush these plants, when the vine will start the growing season in April, we will add to the soil tons of organic materials per hectare, and we will complete the 10, 15, 20% of organic materials we need to feed the system. 80% at least will come from the cover crop. And then with the addition of the branches from the edges, the branches from the trees, and the cover crop, we will give to the soil almost the same quantity of organic materials like in a natural forest. And then the system is complete, and you will have a long, long chain of microorganisms that will eat these plants that are covering the soil and transform them step by step with a long chain of microorganisms, the whole ecosystem I was talking about, and they will transform it in minerals that will be available for the fungus that will take it and share it with the plants.
What has this done for wine quality since you've done this? What have you found that this has done for the wine and for the grapes? Has it made your grapes happier? Have you found that there's a change in the flavor of the grapes? Is there a better chance that they're healthy? What's your feeling about it?
Like every producer, I will tell you that my method is the best one in the world, and that subsequently my wines are the best wines of the world.
Are you Italian? Italians always joke about that.
And you will not believe me, and you will be right. So
Stop.
we still make wine. We still need the high technicity that is the base of the wine industry to make products that will be appreciated everywhere in the world. But the fact is that has also a strong influence on the vine, and like all things that have influence on the vine, that will have an influence on the grapes we will produce, and the grapes will have an influence on the wine. And so you have a link. What I can tell you is that with these methods, I'm sure about a few things. The first one is when we cover the soils with a cover crop, we will produce a mulch. That mulch will be on the soil during the warm season in summer. The soil will eat that cover crop and feed the whole system with that. But that mulch will also protect the soil against the excess rays of the sun. And it will protect the soils against the too high temperatures. With that cover crop, you can win more than 10 Celsius lower on the soil.
Unbelievable.
So it will keep your soil fresher.
And this is different from people just putting grasses in, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and
that's the
different.
thing is
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when you're saying cover crop, I can imagine that someone listening to this is like, well, everybody does that. There's grass
No,
and things like that.
different, but
This is different.
This is different because with the natural grasses, it's poor. It's not a lot of biomass. It's positive. It's some biodiversity, but it's not so protective to the soil. It's not feeding a lot the soil, and sometimes it's closing the soil. And it's sometimes when you cut it too often with a machine, you will waste water. Our system is producing much more because we select plants, we seed them. But then I have, with a mix of plants, I've selected a dozen of them. I have fast growing, high growing. In April, it's sometimes more than 80 centimeters high or 1 meter sometimes when we are very successful. And it's a lot of organic materials that is given to the soil in comparison to the natural grass. And this is also because we don't cut it. We use a roll of faca that is a machine that is only laying the plants on the soil, and they will die and dry slowly. So you will not cut the tube of the plant, and you will never create high water evaporation. So you save a lot of water in the system. So you protect against the temperature, you protect against the drought.
It's amazing.
For the soil, it's very important because a lot of microorganisms will never be killed by the UV rays. So you will preserve the biodiversity of your soil and the complete eating chain in your ecosystem.
You're not killing anything. You're just sort of pushing it down.
Yeah, and then they dry, and when they restart, we recrush it. We come again with the roll of faca, and then it will stop to grow, and it will die naturally on the soil. And the last thing is that the trees themselves, the hedge, they will give some verticality in the system because they are higher than the vines, for the trees much higher. They will have deep roots with a direct access to water because they have a lot of fungi on their roots. And they have high branches with a lot of leaves. These are prune branches, so very dynamic with a lot of new leaves. This canopy will evaporate a lot of water. And every tree is like a natural air conditioner in the parcel. And in the surrounding of every tree, you will feel like in every park in your towns, you will feel the atmosphere fresher.
Yes, that's true.
Not by shade effect. It's not shadow who is making fresher. Even if you are close to the tree, but not under the shade
Yeah.
of the tree, it's fresher because that water evaporation coming from the leaves is taking a lot of calories in the air. Make the experience.
Never really thought about that, but it's true.
In your living room. If you have a heat wave and take water and make a big splash, send all that water on your floor. That will evaporate quite fast, and you will immediately feel the atmosphere fresher. Because it will decrease by evaporation, by thermodynamic effect, it will take calories in the air and decrease temperature. You do the same in your parcel. And when we have 50 trees per hectare, we can, during the heat wave, decrease the peak of the heat wave at the scale of the parcel by 2, 3, 4, until 5 Celsius.
I asked you this, and I think it's an important thing to address because economic viability, you are giving up land to hedges and trees. So how did you figure that problem out? Because sustainability is environmental and economic. You have to have a business. So how did you figure that out?
So first, it's organized. It's line of trees. So I still can go with my tractors inside the parcels, okay? Because mechanics are positive, because the machines are doing a lot of very hard and suffering works, replacing humans. So we want to keep that. What we want to avoid is to destroy the soil by compaction with too heavy machines. We want to avoid to work the soil too much. And if possible, we want to avoid to work the soil at all. Then we will not disturb the horizons. So we will preserve all the ecosystem inside the soil. But we want to keep the machine first. Second, I lose place for my trees, not with the edges, because with the edges, I follow the ditches.
Right.
The ditches are the exit system for my drainage system. When I plant trees inside the parcel, I lose space. And in my system, you can make the calculation. I cancel 2 rows every 21. So I plant 20 rows, I cancel 2 rows of vines, and then I plant in place of these 2 rows a line of trees. And then again, 20 rows. So 2 on 22, it's 9% of vines that I lose.
Yep.
So it's 9% of my number of vines per hectare that I'm losing. But I make a compensation because I increase the density in the rest of the parcel. Inside my rows, I come from 1 meter to 90 centimeters.
Packed in there.
Then I win 11%. -9 plus 11, it's +2. So I can produce the same amount and even more because I have a climate protection with the trees.
Right.
And so I can keep a better level of production when it's a warm season with my Merlot. I can produce fresher Merlot with a lower alcohol degree, with a higher acidity than standard production, with no hedges, no trees, and no soil protection.
You were able to bring the alcohol level of the Merlot down, right?
Yep.
And also, do you think that the wine your Merlot especially has had better flavors as a result of what you've done? I mean, I know you've changed some of the winemaking methods. You use a lot of amphora, and you were able to kind of reverse climate change inside of your vineyard, right?
Yeah, we have all these methods. They have an influence on the microclimate of the parcel. And the result is that we are able to produce Merlot and other varietals with a lower alcohol degree and a higher acidity than before with the same climate. And you have, after half an hour of explanations, you have the answer to your question. Yes, it has an impact on the quality of the wine. This is only one example. I think you have other quality influences that are very diverse, but this is a very good example. And today, I'm able to produce wines in hot vintages. like 2019 or 2020, where a lot of estates, they produce wine with 14 degree of alcohol, 14 and a half. I've heard some 15 here in Médoc.
Oh,
And,
I've had some that are 15,
and
yes.
in both vintages, I had a bit more than 13.
It's the classic style of Bordeaux that used to be before it got so hot, right?
Yeah. I'm sure that we are able to come back to the natural balance of Bordeaux, even with a warmer climate.
People have come to you from all over the Médoc and probably other parts of the world. We haven't talked about that, but can your methods work everywhere? Do you think that they can work outside of viticulture? And what about farmers in other regions of France? Have people been coming to you? Because I know you've been working with some very prestigious chateaux in the Médoc, but are others also coming to see what you're doing and to learn from you?
Yes, agroforestry is not specific at all to viticulture. I've talked about agriculture from the beginning of this conversation. You can produce wheat in an agroforestry system. You can produce corn in an agroforestry system. You can produce fruits in an agroforestry system. A lot of things. And I visited a lot of agroforestry projects in different types of agriculture. So it's adapted to every kind of agriculture. It's maybe more difficult in very warm and very dry climates, even if I think that with the good varietals and plants and trees, you can do that everywhere. And everywhere it will help you to manage water and microclimate of the parcel. So yes, it's adapted to every type of agriculture, for sure. Second, I've not invented a new system. I'm just at the meeting point between forestry, my background, and also my other activity my other business, because I'm also own a large forest in the Pyrenean Mountains. I'm at the meeting point between forestry and viticulture, and I want to cross my two universes. But I've not invented the agroforestry at all. Agroforestry is something very old. It's something that is reinvented by a lot of agricultors everywhere in the world. In some places, it was never abandoned. So I'm very locally at my small place, at the scale of my small village. I have developed something new for my colleagues, and a lot of them, they come to visit, to see what we do, and they take inspiration and they do the same or partly the same in their parcels. So at the beginning, when I was planting my first edges 12 years ago, I was alone. And today, every producer I meet here is asking himself the question when he replants a new parcel, oh, do I have the place for hedge? And a lot of them, they do that. And you have now hundreds of kilometers of hedges crossing the Médoc. So that's spreading quite fast.
Yes, but everybody mentions you're being modest, because when I mentioned your name to people, even in Médoc to the west and also in Saint-Estèphe, everybody knows you and is watching what you're doing and is excited about the results that you've had. So you're being modest.
It's because I'm talking a lot. And
well, you're actually doing it, though. You're not just talking about it. You're actually doing it.
It's because I'm a pioneer, but a local,
yes, you
local
are.
pioneer. Yep. A local pioneer.
You absolutely are.
Before me, you had another one in Bordeaux, Domaine Émile Grelier. I took a high inspiration from that guy. I sent my whole team visit his estate. And by mischance, that day, I had to go to the hospital, and I was the only member of the team not visiting his estate. So it's funny. But I took inspiration from that guy that was the real pioneer in Bordeaux years before me. So we were two pioneers for agroforestry, and you have dozens of agroforesters everywhere in France. So it's a small network that is spreading quite fast now. And that's a very, very good news, because I think that we have a strong instrument facing the new conditions we are meeting right now.
So what you're saying is viticulture is not doomed in Bordeaux, because as you read all of the trade and press, people say it's over for Bordeaux. there's going to be no more Merlot left, and the region will not be able to create wines. You read these things over and over again, and it's hard to know what to believe. So it seems like after talking to you, I really didn't feel that way. Do we have hope for the future here?
Your question and comments are quite funny because I'm sure that Bordeaux is not dead yet. Bordeaux, like every place in the world, is a phoenix. So conditions are changing and we will adapt like everybody everywhere in the world. And I feel I'm convinced that we have a big future because we have the soils. We have the Atlantic influence.
Mm-hmm.
And we will keep that. So we will adapt. Even with a warmer climate, we will adapt. The Médoc region that was supposed to be the last one in environment policy.
It's so true. Everybody has said that, yeah.
It is maybe the first one today
Yep.
in that region. So it's interesting how things can change quite fast and mostly in a crisis period. It's a hard period for all of us, but this has a positive impact because things change more efficiently in a difficult period, in a rough period.
Yes. And for you, the future of Moulis and for Anthonic, you are going to continue doing what you're doing and stay positive?
I'll continue to do what I believe in and what is positive for my environment, because what is positive for my environment is, it's quite egotic to say that it's positive for me and for my family and for my village. But I'm quite confident. Conditions are more difficult. We have more frost in spring, more hail storms in summer. We have warmer climate, more heat waves, like everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We all have the same things to face, but we are able to adapt. We are able to keep a part of the answer with things like agroforestry, keeping the same varietals. We have a part of the answer by introducing new varietals. What I don't believe is in the miracle. People that are saying that, with genetic revolution, we will find the miracle, the new varietal that will give all the answers. The answer is in diversity. I don't believe in people that are saying that we will change all the varietals. We will introduce new varietals, but we need to keep diversity to introduce several new varietals at a small scale and meanwhile adapt the current varietals by adapting the microclimate of the parcel through agroforestry and other things. We have to experiment a lot of diverse answers, and natural selection and human selection will make the job.
The answer oftentimes lies in nature. And I think we don't give enough credit to the fact that that is true. I do want to make one comment before I let you go, which is that your wines are spectacular. I think that Moulis is incredibly underrated. And especially your wines, like I was saying before, they're such a classic Bordeaux style. The alcohol is restrained where you taste the terroir, where there is fruitiness, but it's this integrated wine. I think your wines are fantastic. You can really see the difference in what you're doing versus what some other people are doing, because there is a sense of acidity and balance that I just don't think you can get anywhere. I looked up online in the United States. It looks like your stuff is mostly distributed in California. So California listeners, you are in luck if you go online. There's one shop in Michigan that I think I might be able to order from. You're distributed in the UK and all over Europe. So I hope that you can get a little more distribution in the US, because we want to support you and what you do. You are really very revolutionary. And I hope that people who are producers who are listening to this will either contact you or look into agroforestry, because it is the wave of the future. I think this is one of the most interesting things I have heard of and makes more sense than anything. Organics makes a lot of sense, but makes more sense than biodynamics. Makes so much sense. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your time, and for educating us on this.
Also, I can give you the name of the new estate we have bought quite close from Château Anthonic on the eastern part of Moulis in Grand Pougeot. on these very fantastic soils, gravel soils you have there. It's the only owner in Grand Peugeot that was practicing cover crop.
Oh, wow.
And so it's very interesting for me because we will be able to introduce quite fast organic methods and the agroforestry project inside that estate. And remember that name. It's very easy to remember it because it's an unpronounceable name, Château Lestage d'Arquier Grand Peugeot. And we will quite fast develop the agroforestry project inside that new estate, and we will launch that estate quite fast in US because we have already selected a national distributor for that new brand.
Oh, that is great.
It's a very interesting bet for us.
Okay, well, we will put that in the show notes. We will put the name of the chateau and any links that you want us to have. But in the meantime, people can definitely get your wines as well. We just might have to order them. And so you sell them in Canada as well, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
We are selling to the Quebec monopoly. We are present currently in 5 states in US, New York, New Jersey, in California, in Colorado, in Michigan, and in Minnesota. And in UK, we have several clients. So you can find us through BBR to give you an example, and some other importers that are distributing our wines.
I know.
UK.
But the thing is, the wines are so good that I was looking for somebody in New York, and they're all sold out.
Yeah,
How
but
about that?
They're back on the market in 2 or 3 weeks, I believe.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will keep an eye out for that. Jean-Baptiste, thank you so much. And thank you for doing all the work that you're doing for our industry. It feels like there's hope, and that's really all we need right now. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to meet you and to see how deep you go in covering our wine industry. When you make an interview, you take time.
Oh, yeah. Why would I do this otherwise? What's the point?
Yeah.
And with that, this has been another episode of Wine for Normal People. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.